used in sweets be pasteurized to eliminate the risk of bacterial contamination. Additionally, the natural crystallization process of sugar cake can result in variations in texture, which are now considered unacceptable under the new guidelines. These changes threaten the very existence of sugar cake as Trinidadians know it, replacing a cherished homemade treat with a sanitized, mass-produced version that lacks the soul of the original. These new regulations, while intended to protect public health and safety, have far-reaching consequences for Trinidadian cuisine. They threaten to erase the flavors, textures, and traditions that make the island's food so unique. For many Trinidadians, the loss of these ingredients and dishes is more than just a matter of taste. It's a loss of cultural identity, a severing of the ties that bind families and communities together through food. As the world becomes more interconnected and food safety standards grow ever stricter, the challenge will be to find ways to preserve and celebrate traditional foods, ensuring that future generations can continue to enjoy the rich culinary heritage of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's start with a staple of Caribbean cooking, fresh pimento leaves, also known as allspice leaves. These aromatic leaves are a cornerstone of Trinidadian and wider Caribbean cuisine, lending a unique peppery warmth to stews, soups, and marinades. For generations, cooks have relied on their subtle, complex flavor to elevate everything from rice dishes to slow-cooked meats. But now, these leaves are entirely banned from import, classified as a potential plant pest vector. The concern is that they could harbor insects or diseases that might threaten local agriculture in the importing country. This means that even if you find a way to source them, bringing them in is strictly prohibited. The ban isn't just about the leaves themselves, but about protecting crops and ecosystems from invasive species. For Caribbean communities abroad, this is more than a regulatory hurdle. It's a loss of a culinary tradition, a missing note in the symphony of flavors that define home-cooked meals. The absence of fresh pimento leaves forces cooks to improvise, often with dried substitutes or entirely different herbs, but the result is never quite the same. Next, let's talk about preserves, specifically chunky-style passion fruit or sorrel jam. These jams are a beloved treat, often made at home or found in local markets, bursting with the vibrant flavors of tropical fruit. The texture is part of the appeal. Large chunks of fruit, suspended in a sweet, tangy syrup, sometimes with seeds left in for extra crunch and authenticity. But when it comes to export, these homemade-style jams run into trouble. Regulations for preserved fruit are strict, specifying everything from the size of fruit pieces to the amount of seeds allowed. The goal is to ensure consistency, safety, and shelf stability, but it means that the very qualities that make these jams special, their rustic, homemade feel, are exactly what disqualifies them. For small producers and home cooks, meeting these standards is often impossible without industrial equipment. As a result, the jams that make it to international shelves are often smoother, more uniform, and, some would say, less authentic than what you'd find in a Trinidadian kitchen. The issue comes down to seed content and fruit chunk size. International preserved fruit specifications are designed for mass production, where uniformity is key. Large chunks and visible seeds, which are prized in Caribbean preserves, are seen as potential hazards or signs of inconsistency elsewhere. Inspectors look for jams that are smooth, with evenly distributed fruit and minimal seeds. Anything else is flagged as non-compliant. This creates a dilemma for Caribbean producers. Do they change their recipes to fit the rules, or stay true to tradition, and risk being shut out of foreign markets? For many, the answer is to keep making jam the old way for local consumption, while producing a separate, more standardized version for export. But for consumers abroad, this means missing out on the true taste and texture of Caribbean preserves. Another casualty of regulation is fresh dasheen bush, the leafy green that's essential for making callaloo, a rich savory soup that's a staple of Trinidadian cuisine. Dasheen bush, also known as taro leaves, must now be pre-washed in a chlorinated solution before export. While this might sound like a simple safety measure, the reality is that the process wilts the delicate leaves, leaving them limp and unusable for traditional recipes. Callaloo depends on the freshness and texture of the leaves. Wilted dasheen just doesn't deliver the same flavor or mouthfeel. For Trinidadians living abroad, this means that making authentic callaloo is nearly impossible, unless they grow their own dasheen or find a local source. The regulation intended to prevent the spread of plant diseases ends up erasing a key ingredient from the diaspora's culinary toolkit. Gira pork is another dish that faces new obstacles. This spicy, cumin-laced pork is a favorite at street stalls and family gatherings, known for its bold flavors and tender meat. But new rules around specified risk materials, SRM in pork, combined with restrictions on non-standardized spice rubs, have made it nearly impossible to export or even prepare Gira pork for sale in some countries. The SRM rules are designed to prevent the spread of diseases like BSE, but they also ban certain cuts of pork, and require detailed documentation of every ingredient. Non-standardized spice blends, like the homemade Gira mixes used in Trinidad, are viewed with suspicion unless they're produced in certified facilities. This means that the Gira pork you find abroad is often a pale imitation, made with pre-packaged spices and cuts of meat that don't quite match the original. For Trinidadians, it's a reminder of how food safety rules, while important, can sometimes clash with culinary heritage. Fresh barbadine, also known as giant granadilla, is another ingredient that's fallen afoul of import regulations. This massive sweet fruit is a relative of the passion fruit, prized for its fragrant pulp and impressive size. In Trinidad, it's used in drinks, desserts, and even savory dishes. But its very size and the abundance of seeds inside make it a target for restrictions. Import authorities worry that the seeds could carry pests or diseases, and the sheer bulk of the fruit makes inspection and processing difficult. As a result, fresh barbadine is now prohibited from entering many countries. For those who grew up enjoying its unique flavor, this is a significant loss. While processed barbadine products, like juices or syrups, might still be available, they can't fully capture the experience of eating the fresh fruit, scooping out the pulp with a spoon, or sharing a slice with family and friends. Homemade tulum, the chewy coconut and molasses candy that's a favorite in Trinidad, faces its own set of challenges. Tulum is made by simmering grated coconut with dark molasses and spices until it forms a sticky, flavorful mass, then shaping it into bite-sized pieces. It's a treat that's as much about tradition as taste, often made in small batches for holidays or special occasions. But when it comes to export, tulum fails on two counts: moisture content and packaging. Regulations for low-water activity sweets are strict, requiring precise moisture levels and airtight seals to prevent spoilage. Homemade tulum, with its rustic packaging and variable texture, rarely meets these standards. The same goes for fresh chadan beni powder, a pungent herb that's essential in Trinidadian cooking. The powder is often made by drying and grinding the leaves at home, but unless the drying process is approved and carefully controlled, it's considered a risk for bacterial growth. This means that the chadan beni powder you find abroad is often less potent, made from herbs that have been processed to meet safety standards but have lost some of their signature flavor. The drying process for chadan beni, or culantro, is a point of contention. Traditional methods involve air-drying the leaves in the sun or in a warm kitchen, a process that preserves the herb's intense aroma and flavor. But these methods don't always meet modern food safety standards, which require controlled temperatures and humidity to prevent bacterial growth. As a result, homemade chadan beni powder is often banned from export, and commercial versions are made using industrial dryers and preservatives. The difference in flavor is noticeable. The commercial powder is milder, less vibrant, and sometimes even bitter. For cooks who rely on chadan beni to give their dishes a distinctive kick, this is a real loss. It's another example of how regulations, while well-intentioned, can end up diluting the very qualities that make Caribbean food unique. Even something as simple as bake powder, the leavening mix used to make fried dough, or bake, is affected by regulations. In Trinidad, bake is a beloved breakfast food, often filled with saltfish, cheese, or fried plantains. The key to perfect bake is the right blend of baking powder, flour, and sometimes a touch of yeast. Many families use pre-mixed bake powder, a convenient shortcut that guarantees consistent results. But for export, these premixes must meet strict standards for ingredient ratios and labeling. If the leavening agents aren't standardized, meaning their proportions and sources are precisely documented, the mix can't be sold abroad. This might seem like a minor issue, but for Caribbean bakers, it's a major inconvenience. It means that the bake you make overseas might not rise the way it should, or might taste slightly off, all because of a technicality in the rules. Sea moss gel, a popular health food in Trinidad and across the Caribbean, is also subject to tight controls. Made by soaking and blending sea moss, a type of edible seaweed, into a thick, nutrient-rich gel, it's used in drinks, desserts, and even as a vegan thickener. But, to be exported, sea moss gel must be produced in a facility that's approved by the EU or USDA, with a certified water source and rigorous hygiene standards. This is a high bar for small producers, many of whom make sea moss gel in home kitchens or small workshops. The result is that most of the sea moss gel available abroad is made by large companies, often with added preservatives, and a different texture than the homemade version. For those who grew up drinking sea moss punch, or eating sea moss jelly, the difference is clear. The commercial product is convenient, but it lacks the freshness and subtle flavor of the real thing. Finally, there's coconut sweetbread, a beloved Trinidadian treat made with grated coconut, raisins and spices, baked into a moist, fragrant loaf. The key ingredient is desiccated coconut, which gives the bread its rich texture and flavor. But for export, the coconut must be treated to meet ready-to-eat pathogen reduction standards, a process that often involves heat treatment or chemical washes. Many small bakeries and home cooks use locally produced coconut that hasn't undergone this process, making their sweetbread ineligible for export. The result is that the coconut sweetbread you find abroad is often made with industrially processed coconut, which can be drier and less flavorful. For Trinidadians living overseas, it's another reminder of how food safety rules, while important, can sometimes come at the cost of authenticity and tradition. Each of these examples shows how the intersection of regulation and tradition shapes what foods make it across borders, and what flavors are left behind. This is a systematic dismantling of culinary heritage under the guise of bureaucracy. It attacks the heart of how Trinidadian culture is shared and sustained abroad, turning family recipes into, well, contraband. This is a cultural emergency for the diaspora. Share this video in every Trinidadian group, on every social media feed, and with every food importer you know. For more critical alerts on policies targeting Caribbean heritage, you must stay informed. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and share this warning widely.